Welcome to another session of Film Appreciation with Raghavendra sir. Today we're going to talk about film appreciation itself, which is a whole other craft that most of us know nothing about. Uh, Over the course of this 1 hour, we'll be knowing what film appreciation is, what's how it has it evolved, and what all goes into you know what all goes into reading a piece of cinema. Over to you, sir.
To begin, this is not so much about film appreciation as much as film criticism and interpretation, which are all components of film appreciation. Now, first of all, we have before going into thing of criticism, film criticism, we have to look at criticism itself, where it came from. Now, criticism, obviously, art criticism is it begins with the arts, but the point is, where did the art start? What were the original practice? Is the question. And arts were essentially the earliest use of the arts would be religion, right? It would be, for example, music. How did music begin? It began with prayer, I think. And
Yeah.
I think arts, the painting began with religious icons. And before that there were the cave paintings. They were also magical in some way, not as organized religion, but magical. But later on it became religious icons. It's the same thing with literature. The earliest literature would have been religious literature in some sense. Okay, but gradually, as the power of religion weakened over people, what happened was art became secular. And when art became secular, it still had a purpose, but nobody knew what that purpose was anymore. It was no longer praise of God, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
So that when it the purpose of art became less certain with the decline of religion as a as a binding force, as a force, what happened was that there was some need to theorize about it, to describe it in some way, so that you could arrive at some kind of think of what the purpose of art was. Okay, so that you can say is roughly, I mean, this is putting it very generally and very simplistically, but that would have given rise to the discipline of criticism. Okay, since criticism therefore follows art. Art theory follows art. Art theory is not a prescription by which art should be created. Whereas in Indian, again, here again, your rasa, notion of rasa, your notion of dramaturgy in India seems to be prescriptive in some way, but we won't go into that right now. Okay. So the thing is that criticism follows practice. The practice is there, but the question is that criticism has to determine what is the function of this art object. Why is this art object there? What is the thing? So the question is that art is always progressing in some way. It doesn't remain static, right? It doesn't remain static. It keeps going ahead. It keeps, as the situation changes, you have art adapts to new situations. So you have all these movements, all these things which came about. What was the movement which came? What was the thing which came out of the arrival of photography? Obviously,
Yeah.
obviously, obviously, photography made it impossible, no, no, made it superfluous to paint in great detail, right? Then you had this thing of perception, like your impressionism,
Yes.
modernism in painting. Modernism is some kind of subjectivity in painting. It is no longer the shall we say, the eye of God is no longer there. It's the human eye becomes the thing. Okay, well, the camera, so camera made it redundant to replicate reality in its exactness, right? Now, um, the question is, what exactly does criticism do? Let's look at it. Now, criticism is like explaining rationally the workings of irrational impulses. You could talk about, art as irrational basically, and criticism is basically to determine, to give rational explanations for what is essentially irrational. Okay, it's like this. Now, supposing you're climbing a peak which nobody knows, right? You know it's not been charted. You're climbing this peak. The artist climbs a certain peak. He doesn't know where he's gone. He's done some such thing, right? The purpose of criticism is to chart the peak, probably build steps to it, notional steps at least, to it's like a map, I mean, you have a territory, but you need a map. So the map relates to the territory the same way that the criticism relates to practice, artistic practice. Okay. Now, this is fundamentally you must understand from this that without art criticism, I mean, this sounds a little, many people will take exception to this. Without art criticism, there cannot be art. Okay, the reason is that how do you determine what is art, what is valid art and what is not valid art? Everybody who scrolls something, who writes some gibberish, okay, can claim to be a writer. Any person who makes noise can claim to be a musician. So the question is, there has to be art criticism of some sort, determining what exactly is the function, why this works, why that doesn't work, right? Without
So
that,
does criticism qualify to be called an art itself?
it's not an art. It's too rational. It's too rational to be called. It's part of the humanities, you could say. See, the question is, it's not only art and science. There are other things like social sciences, humanities, there are other disciplines as well. It's not an art, certainly not an art, because its methods are too rational. It's analytical, so it's not an art. Neither is it a science. It's basically a fundamental thing of the humanities. It's a fundamental component of the humanities. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So the question is that art is not subservient. The criticism is not subservient, because the point is that criticism lays down the map. It's like this: you can have any territory, you can have anything. You don't know what you've got unless you've got somebody charting it. Something is being charted, something is being analyzed, something is being said, and you propose that the purpose of art is this, that this is doing this, that is not doing this, this works, that doesn't work. No, that's always tentative. It's not that you're saying the final word. For example, a lot of the stuff which was dismissed earlier, a lot of art was dismissed, literature was dismissed, later on became canonical works of literature and art. Okay, so that's always there. It's tentative. The thing is that that platform has to be there. You see, the platform is necessary for different viewpoints, experts. Okay, expert is not somebody who's nominated an expert. It is a denomination of an expert through an award or some such thing. No, or even a person who calls himself an expert. An expert is simply rub shoulders with other experts, and finally argument will prevail. Opinion, not opinion. One person's opinion is as good as another's, but argument will prevail over others, and finally you have a hierarchy of arguments, not a hierarchy of people, not a hierarchy of personages, but you have a hierarchy of arguments. Okay. So the question is, so then criticism becomes a highly intellectual discipline, and that's what it is. But then there are some of the greatest minds of the 20th century in the arts, like people like Walter Benjamin, people of the Frankfurt School, some of the French critics, Roland Barthes, Foucault. All these people were critics. Derrida, they were all critics. So the question is, criticism does something. It's a highly intellectual discipline. It's not an art because it's too intellectual to be art. Art is not meant to, it's not supposed to be intellectual. Art is irrational. Art does something else. An artist need
I
not know what he's doing. Yeah, please.
I got into into an argument with a friend of mine over the same thing, and what she pointed out was that when a person reads something, like in terms of criticism as well, a person reads something and kind of draws his own interpretation of that. That itself is an expression, and in turn becomes artistic. Now, how valid is that argument?
A
Like I
person
pointed
reads.
out the same thing. It's to intellectualize.
No. You're saying that the person reads something.
A person reads something and suppose writes a review about it or writes an article about it, so
Yeah.
something some sort of an interpretation is brought to the table by that person. Now
Yes.
that the forming of that interpretation, isn't that an artistic creation, is what a friend of mine argued.
It's not artistic. See, what you're talking about here is, like, for example, Borges, the Argentine writer, said that every reading of a book is a creation in itself. In some way it's true, but the question is, you can't very well discuss this, right? You can't discuss it. See, the question is, you have to narrow the field of discussion once again to something or the other. Now the question is, you have to it is creative in some. Look, let's say this much, right? Every reading of a book is a creative reading. Supposing I say the sunset over the water, you will imagine one color, another person another imagine another color, the third person will imagine a third color, right? The question is, so they're all creative in some sense. A single line will mean one thing to you, mean something to somebody else, something to somebody else. But we are talking about a level of creativity which people can share. You get me? So the question is that creativity, to share that creativity, you have to narrow it down to some level. So finally, what is art? Like, for example, every doodle in some sense is an art. Every line ever written is literature. Okay, but we have to narrow it down to valid and what is not valid. The whole purpose of criticism is to narrow it. Okay, it's not to broaden it, but to narrow that. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is, in theory, yes, I agree with you. It's creative. Not only is it's creative, but the point is that if artistic, for example, if critical things becomes creative, I would say its value is less, because you start saying all kinds of things, right? You're being creative, right? The question is, for it to be intellectually valid, you have to narrow it down, you have to rationalize, you must keep it to logic. It must be put in logic. The more creative criticism is, see, analytical and creative, I take it as two different things, right? Creative usually means irrational in some sense, right? So this is the thing. So you've got to narrow it down. I would not prefer to use the word creative. In some sense, it could be creative also, but I would prefer not to use that term. Okay. Now the question is, now naturally, though criticism aids work of art, aids the work of art, what happens in practice is, okay, as the art has become more and more commercial, rather when works of art fetch huge amounts of money, when literature becomes commercial, then what happens is the aims of art are not the aims of industry. Okay. So what has happened today is, gradually the publishing industry has a say in what criticism should be. Okay. The film industry has a say in what criticism should be. Now, criticism is good for cinema. It is not good for the film industry. It is good for literature. It is not good for publishing. Okay. Because the point is, if somebody says something nasty about a work of literature, people may not buy that book. Now, the publisher will not want this. So the whole point is that criticism aids the discipline. It does not aid the commercial interest. That you have to keep in mind. But gradually, what is happening in criticism today is it's becoming more and more commercial, and this hostile, basically not hostile, I would say this oppositional relationship is gradually disappearing. And what happens when the oppositional relationship disappears? Critics become publicists, right? They become publicists, they become public relations experts. That's what happens. So the question is, obviously criticism is decline as the commercial interest in the arts has kept going up. Okay. Now can you go to the next slide? Film and the arts. Okay. Now the arts can be arranged in a thing. That film is one thing. The arts can be arranged. One end is the practical, the most practical of the arts, and that is what is that would be design. Okay. And the other end would be the most abstract of the arts, which is music. Right? Nobody knows what is the purpose of music today. I mean, we really don't know. So what are the various categories here? It would begin with design at one end, then architecture, then sculpture, then painting, then drama, then fiction, then poetry, then dance, then music. You get the thing. You see the spectrum of the arts would be like this. This side is the most practical. Architecture is slightly, occupies space. Then sculpture would come, because it again is some kind of it occupies space. It has a certain thing. Then painting, then drama, then fiction, poetry. As you go on, you see that the concreteness of the object, critically claimed art hardly sells, no, actually no longer true. The point is that's not really a fact, because what happens is it depends on who is criticizing it. Like, for example, let's look at critically acclaimed paintings. How much does Van Gogh fetch? How much does an unknown artist fetch? Obviously the kind of thing we have fetches a lot. Okay. See, the point is whether it sells or not is not the issue here. Okay, because I've been reading a lot of criticism, Indian criticism recently. They use the word brilliant. This is brilliant, that is brilliant. I read somewhere some man saying you can make a brilliant movie, but you can't guarantee that it will be seen by people. The point is, it's not that easy to make a brilliant movie, right? It's not that easy to write a brilliant novel. The point is this. Okay, if you want to make money, go into real estate. Okay, it's not necessary for you to be in cinema. It is not necessary for you to be in the arts to make money. If your basic thing is only to make money, why should you choose cinema? Why should you choose literature? So this is the thing. So the question of how much, we need not judge a movie. This is not the interest of film buff to figure out how much money this movie made. It's of no interest to me to figure out how much money this movie made. My business as a film critic is to figure out what is the thing, validity in this film. What is this doing? Is it doing something worthwhile? Is it not doing something? While a judgment is this. And as spectators, you should not bother about how much money he made. That is his business. His balance sheet is his business. His profit and loss is his business. It's not your business. It's not your interest to look at that, how much money the movie made. We need not even discuss this. We are as film buffs, cinephiles, we need not even discuss this. Okay. Now, So the question is, cinema would fit into various things. It would be practical. Can you give me an example of a very practical kind of film? I think on an airplane, when you go on airplanes, that instruction manual which is done, that would be a very practical kind of film. Okay. On the other end of the film would be a very abstract kind of avant-garde kind of animation film. Something from the American Underground or some such thing. One of the things in animated film, a very abstract kind, would be the other end. Like it will be close to music. Okay, this would be the thing. But what interests the critic, by and large, the territory in which the critic is working is basically the territory of from the dramatic and from the it would be the ranging between the dramatic and the abstract. That would be the thing, because it's you can't nobody criticizes, nobody critiques instruction manuals. Nobody does that. Okay. Now let's go into the next one, the kinds of film criticism. Okay. Now the kind of criticism, film criticism that most people are familiar with is what is called reviewing, right? Now the point is, what is reviewing? It's basically evaluation of the film immediately after the film comes out. As soon as the film comes out, whether it's worth seeing or not. But the point here is that it's not enough for you to give your opinions here, that you have to stamp your authority as a critic. You have to stamp your authority as a critic through your writing, not by giving your CV alongside. You have to generally convince people that you know what you're talking about. And for that, you have to have insights, right? And without insights, nobody will be convinced that you have any knowledge of cinema at all, right? So the question is, the important thing is, what is the exceptional film, what is not what is the ordinary film. And you must know cinema quite well. You must know the various things very well to be able to critique. And these insights are very important, For example, sometimes, there is this personal stamp which the critic is supposed to put on, the reviewer critic is supposed to put on his writing. So as a result of it, a lot of them extremely witty. Okay. The point is, many of the American critics, especially some of the great ones, and they're no longer around. Not what is his name? Pauline Kael was one of my favorites. This John Simon was one of my favorites. They were very witty, extremely witty, and they would
Yeah,
know. And the question of language is a great language. Okay, John Simon about Dr. Zhivago. Dr. Zhivago does for snow what Lawrence of Arabia did for sand. Okay, so the question. So this kind of thing, okay. So I mean, Pauline Kael writing on a movie called Marooned. It was a science fiction film, and Marooned. She said, I mean, no, who in his right mind would cast uh, Gregory Peck, David Jansen, and Richard Crenna in a single movie when everybody knows they're the same person? Okay. Okay. Now the point here you're making is that when you choose actors for your film, you should keep them apart from each other. They should have distinct personalities. You can't put two people who look alike. Nowadays in Hindi cinema, it looks like they select good-looking guys or models, right? And models by and large look like each other, right? So the question is, when you select three good-looking guys, the chances are these three good-looking guys conform to a single notion of what is good-looking. So the point is this, that you should choose people with different persona, different character, not, different physiognomies who look different. Like, for example, you can't, at one point, Shah Rukh Khan is different now. He used to have a very self-mocking dimension to his character, to his personality, right? Persona in
true.
cinema. The same thing with Govinda, right? So you couldn't cast Govinda and Shah Rukh Khan together.
Work in
It
the
would be
same film.
a bad decision to cast them together, because both of them are mocking themselves. So if you have one kind of character, like you've got, like, for example, Chris Tucker and what's his name, the kung fu guy, Jackie Chan.
Jackie Chan, yeah.
Okay. Now the point is, these two are different from each other. It's very different, necessary to put these to act as foils. So the point is that the person must be aware of all these. There are a lot of things. How do you cast people? What kind of music you use? Now, for example, I'll give you. A lot of people are producing noir nowadays, dark films. I mean, they seem to be in fashion nowadays. You can't use Indian classical music for dark films. They're always mood. Indian classical music cannot produce a dark mood. You can't use Indian classical music. So the question is what kind of music you use. Are you going to use in a very philosophical thing with a lot of percussion? Are you going to use music with that heartbeat sound, the percussion? No, you wouldn't use it, right? No, the critic would have all this kind of thing. You would have this kind of ideas of what to use. For example, you take a movie like casting. What kind of actors you would use? You take Irfan Khan. How can you cast Irfan Khan as an innocent, holy, I mean, very innocent person? His face has got this thing of knowing or worldliness, right? Worldly wisdom, a kind of a knowing kind of face. How, for example, in a movie like Life of Pi, is that little boy going to grow up to be Irfan Khan, right?
True.
Now, these are also the question is. Now, these are all insights that you got to be bold enough. You got to look at it and say, what is this? What is this chap doing? Why is he doing this? Why is he not doing that? Okay. Or you look at Satyajit Ray's some movie, which is that Agantuk. Look at
Yeah.
Agantuk, Satyajit Ray's movie, where Utpal Dutt plays the part of a sage. Utpal Dutt is a comic actor. How can a comic actor play the part of a sage? This is Satyajit Ray's movies, right? But the point is, I wouldn't cast Utpal Dutt to play the part of a sage and not to give him a wig. I wouldn't have done that. Okay. Now, these are all things that you should be bold enough. You should stick out. But the question that insight should be there, right? This kind of thing. So that's very necessary in this is the reviewer. The reviewer is supposed to look at all this, the everyday aspects. Does this work? Does that not work? Whether a beautiful, whether you look, for example, this chap who's got this movie called this the Cold War. Who's the guy who made that? Pavel something. The Cold
Pavel
War.
Pawlowski,
Yeah. What is his earlier movie?
the Cold War guy. No, I haven't seen Cold War.
Okay, the previous one, he photographs always. Ida, correct.
Ida.
Ida is right. Ida. Now the question is, why is this man composing like this, always shooting from some distance of 50 yards or 100 yards from every single scene? No drama. The drama goes away because you're shooting from such a great distance because you want to compose your pictures. Now there's something seriously wrong with the filmmaker who composes like that. You're supposed to be when you're having a dramatic thing. You don't do this kind of intimate conversation between people in certain British movies. The intimate conversation between two people will be shot from 100 yards because you've got to get countryside, you've got to get all this. Okay, so the question is, all these are the kind of things that a reviewer would look at. Okay, the reviewer is supposed to be insights into whether the film is working or not, whether the idea itself is outdated, whether the idea works, whether the idea is prejudiced, and this sort of thing, right? And to look at whether what the film is doing is valid in terms of fiction, in terms of its constituent elements. Okay, is that all right? Okay, now opinions are not to be confused. You're not supposed to give opinions here. I would strongly say that this entire business of star rating should be disallowed, because what does it do? Who is this person giving the star? You've got to convince through writing. But if people are not going to read at all, if they're not going to read, then obviously writing is not going to be much use. So you just want to look at the star and then go and see the movie and not see the movie.
True. Happens all the time.
Yeah, it happens all the time. Okay. So you have to evoke the movie in some sense. See, evoke the movie means not simply tell the story, tell it in as and keep the mystery of the film intact in some way. Don't reveal everything, number one, but also awaken the curiosity of the person. When I try to write criticism, I try to write in such a way that people who haven't seen I don't write immediately. I don't rarely write reviews. The people who have not seen the film should actually want to see the movie after reading about it. That is my thing, and the reviewer should also do that. I mean, unless but the question is, he should make you want to. You should make he or she should make you want to read the criticism. Okay. The language is very important. Wit is very important. Keeping your reader engaged in the writing is very important. All these are very important, which is why I think that some of these guys are very great stylists here. America, especially the American critics, not so much the British critics. So I don't think too much of. The Americans were very, very stylish in their writing. Now, reviewing is done for newspapers and magazines of a general nature. Okay. Of course, the level of the newspapers is going down nowadays. But the point is, at one point, it was pretty high, the kind of criticism which was there. Okay. The second kind of criticism is intellectual or essayistic criticism. Okay. Now, here the critic is making larger connections. He's not looking at immediately at the time of the film itself coming out. You can't, for instance, do a review of Battleship Potemkin. Get my point? You can't do a review of Citizen Kane today. Okay. Review means immediate. You can, if you want to go back to it after 10 years or after 5 years or some such thing, go back subsequently much later, then you'll have to say something more, make connections with something larger. Look at Citizen Kane. You can, for example, look at a biopic of some politician made today, okay, fictitious politician, and compare it to Citizen Kane. It's possible you can do that. But the point is that this is the second kind of criticism is called essayistic and or intellectual criticism, is what I generally do. Okay, that what happens here is there used to be this critic by the name of Iqbal Masood. You're aware of him?
No,
He
sir.
used to okay, he used to write in the 70s and 80s, I think. He was a very, I mean, he used to make all kinds of connections with the Hindi movies, social connections, political connections. He was very, very, I think I've sort of, you could say I've continued from wherever he left. And of course, my thing is more, it's more detailed, but he used to do that. So he was he was that kind of thing. So the question is, and it's okay, this is intellectual and essayistic criticism. Any questions on this? How would you put it? With the kind of stuff they published in Economic and Political Weekly, the film criticism they published there, or the which is not really about cinema as much as some some social aspects of the movies. Or you can look at Frontline, or you can look at Caravan, the kind of criticism they would publish there. Okay, for example, the kind of roles that a filmmaker, a film artist played, what those roles meant in various times. Devanand's early films, Devanand's later films. They're not simply eulogies or fan writing, but actually analytical writing. That would be Susan Sontag. I've given a thing of Susan Sontag here. Susan
Yeah.
Sontag, something, I think, The Imagination of Disaster, about the science fiction film. That would be an essay. You can read Susan Sontag on this. Susan Sontag is one of the best essayists on
She
intellectual.
wrote on photography as well.
Yeah, correct. Of course. But these are essays. It's there in, I think, Susan Sontag Reader. I would recommend that you read Susan Sontag. I've given this, I think, Imagination of Disaster. It's there in this, what do you say, this PPT. Okay.
Yes.
The third kind of criticism is called academic criticism. Academic criticism does not aim for evaluation and cannot be the basis of an appreciation of cinema. This is usually aligned to schools, what are called schools: feminism, right? Marxism, okay? Marxism, Leninism, feminism, Althusser, okay? This kind of stuff. But usually what happens is psychoanalysis, right? These are schools. Now, the point here is that these academic, now the question is, by and large, intellectual and academic are generally taken into sort of interchangeably in India, right? We normally say intellectual and academic. But the
True.
point is, an intellectual is interested of a general nature, okay? With the lay person, he would know politics, he would know the arts, he would know sociology, he would know all little bits, so that he can link up to this, to that. Whereas the academic is actually involved in one particular discipline, and he will look at it only from that point of view. His focus is much sharper, much narrower. So usually what happens is, for example, you look at Hitchcock's films and you say Hitchcock had a castration complex. It's of no benefit to Hitchcock if you had a castration complex, right? So the question is, academic criticism is not useful for the cinephile. I don't know, in India they seem to be, they don't seem to, where do you place Anupama Chopra or Raj? They are critics, I mean reviewers, obviously. They're reviewers. Both of them are reviewers. Yeah, but I think they do a lot of talking, and it's very difficult in talking and interviews and that sort of thing. It's very difficult to be incisive in talking, right? You must write much more. Of course, both of them write
No,
also.
but yeah, about
They're
what
reviewers.
their take on films is. Yeah, as reviewers, what do you
Yeah, they're
think about them
reviewers.
as reviewers?
I'm sorry, I would rather not speak about my what is it called, my colleagues in the field. I mean, it's not done to speak about my colleagues in the field. But I'll say this much: they're basically reviewers. They're not intellectual critics. They're not essayistic critics, and they are not what are they? They're not academic critics. Now, an academic piece of criticism is as useful to cinema as ornithology is to birds. Okay, is ornithology useful to birds? It's not useful, right? Similarly, essayistic criticism can be of some use. It can be of some use. It can be, in fact, because it's a general thing. But academic criticism is not useful at all, by and large. Of course, Bordwell, grammar of cinema. The other things are grammar of cinema. You know what the grammar of cinema is? Christian Metz, who did this thing on the montage, who did this thing of syntagmatic analysis of movies, how movies are put together, the various classifications in the construction of movies and all that. That also is not helpful to a cinephile. Okay, all that is essayistic criticism, not essayistic. It's academic criticism. Bordwell, some person who could somehow, because he's in, especially his book on the. Have you heard of Bordwell? David Bordwell.
I've heard about him. I've never
Yeah.
read anything of him.
His book, The Classical Hollywood Cinema, I think it's a very important film. It's probably, you'll understand all about the construction of classical Hollywood cinema, but it won't be useful in an appreciation of individual movies. He's not that sort of thing. It won't be. He may not sharpen he would not sharpen your appreciation of cinema. But the point is, he gives you grammar. He's more of a grammar of cinema in some sense, right? All of them are the grammar of cinema. So these are all like, if you're analyzing a piece of literature, you wouldn't look at a grammar book, right? It's the last thing you would look at. If you're looking at, for example, at Kafka or Hemingway or Dostoevsky, you wouldn't study a grammar book in order to understand these people. Grammar is the very thing basic which is given. You can understand grammar from construction of sentences from novels and all that, but you can't really appreciate cinema through an understanding of its grammar and its syntax, right? You get my point? Okay, another example I'll give you. Okay, it's a joke. Say, let's take a joke, right? Now, a joke has a psychoanalytical meaning. You can interpret a joke psychoanalytically. You know that, right? Freudian interpretation of a joke. But the point is, the Freudian interpretation of a joke will not tell you why a joke is funny. Okay? It will do something else, but it won't tell you why a joke is funny. Whereas what the ordinary person looks at a joke for is for its humor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the question is, this academic criticism is like that. They'll tell you what a film means, the inner meanings, the psychoanalytical meaning. Like another guy is Slavoj Zizek. Have you heard of Slavoj Zizek?
No.
That dies at DK. He does a lot on David Lynch. Okay. David Lynch has done a lot of work on David Lynch. I think Bunkum.
Could you spell it again? Could you spell it once again?
ZIZDK. I don't go along with this Zizek. I don't know how exactly. He's of course a big guy. He's very important. Slavoj Zizek. Yeah. Okay. He has a lot of Lynch. I'm not so sure about. Again, it's academic criticism, I think, but there seems to be some kind of. He seems to be arriving at certain meanings about Lynch, which might appeal to the ordinary viewer also. Okay, let's go along further. Okay.
So Shanmukh has another question. He says the kind of impact Cahiers du Cinema had over the French cinema is huge, and it basically changed cinema forever there. Of course, it is post-Bresson impact. Why cannot criticism have the same impact here in India? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, you've had André Bazin, who was a great critic, and that incidentally, Cahiers du Cinema was not an academic. Not an academic film journal. Like, for example, it was closer to something like Sight and Sound, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Sight and Sound is a film magazine. Okay.
Yeah,
it's closer to reviewing. They also have other things alongside reviewing, like interviews, this, that. They have all that thing. It's much closer to film appreciation. Whereas your film quarterly, that also is a bit like that. But academic journals are usually from film studies departments of universities. Okay. They're a different breed altogether. Cahiers du Cinema is not academic film criticism. And what's his name? André Bazin was not. He was a cinephile, basically. His appreciation of cinema came from his love of cinema. Academics don't come from the love of cinema. They come from feminism. They come from issues. They come from pedagogy. See, the basic thing is, if you're studying feminist, say, women's studies, if you're into women's studies, okay. Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Now, if you're into women's studies, there's a place there for study of cinema about women, right? That is not really interested so much in cinema as in women's issues. You get me? Cinema is only a tool, only a territory they would have. So that is not really. It's not really film criticism as much as women's studies in some way, where they use cinema. So that is what I mean by Cahiers du Cinema was not like that. Cahiers du Cinema was involved in cinema. Okay.
Also, when French cinema changed, it was the people who worked in Cahiers du Cinema who changed it.
Yeah, he did this, but I don't think they were good critics. I don't think Godard was a good critic. I don't think Rivette was a good critic. I don't think
there were two.
Truffaut was the only person.
Came from that cinephile.
I can't figure out what they're writing. Okay, whereas this chap Truffaut was the only guy. He was not such a good filmmaker, not a great filmmaker, except for 2 or 3 movies. I think Jules and Jim. But he was Jules and Jim, and I think Shoot the Pianist.
The Piano Player.
Yeah,
400 blows.
400 blows. Yeah. Okay. The question, but the point is, he was a better critic in the sense you could clearly understand what he was saying. You can't understand Godard at all. What is he saying? I can't figure out at all. I don't want to read him at all. So the question is, they came from Cahiers du Cinema. They were not great film critics. They came from there. They seem to have done something. They seem to have done a lot. They were cinephiles basically. They produced cinema. But I don't think their contribution to film criticism was much. Not much. They became famous as film critics after they became famous as filmmakers. Okay. Okay. Now, I've given you a thing of academic criticism by this well-known Laura Mulvey on a famous essay of hers on visual pleasure. Okay, narrative and film narrative and visual pleasure. Please have a look at that. I mean, you to understand what exactly academic critics would do. Okay, can we go to the next slide now? Now, film interpretation is how good or bad a film is cannot be, shall we say, segregated from what it means. Okay, the point is that a film means certain things. Now, let's look at the various kinds of meaning which can be made of a film. Okay, film interpretation. As one goes deeper and deeper into cinema, one begins to appreciate aspects which are not visible on the surface. Now the question is complexity and ambiguity are very important notions. Yeah, please. Complexity and ambiguity are very important notions when you come to appreciating cinema. Okay, nuance of subtler thing is very important. Okay, now the simplest kind of meaning is what is called the referential meaning. The referential meaning is simply an understanding of the world dealt with by the film, the catching of the story, and the relationship between the characters, generally the catching of the story, and the kind of world, artificial world that the film has set in. What are the laws in the world? What is the politics of that world? So it's basically shall we say, a clear and sharp understanding of the story of the film, together with all the thing where the story is told, right? Now the point is this is the by and large the simplest kind of meaning, but all movies are not equally easily understandable. This referential meaning. Can you give me an example of a film where the referential meaning is not clear? Popular film? I don't mean Indian popular film. I mean popular film. Lynch, for example,
I'd
Mulholland
say,
Drive, right?
yeah, Mulholland Drive is
Mulholland
there.
Drive would
Barton
be a
Fink is
difficult
there.
film. Barton Fink, of course. Yeah. Mulholland Drive would be an example of Pulp Fiction. The chronology of the events we're not very sure, right? So the point is that the more complex the film is, the more it could be that this the immediate meaning of the film, the referential meaning, which corresponds to the story, corresponds to the world of the film itself, would be difficult. Okay, it may be somewhat difficult. Okay, see, basically, what is the film giving you? The film is not giving you a story. The film is giving you images, it's giving you a sequence of images, it's giving you sounds, it's giving you dialogue, it's giving you this. You are actually constructing the film in your head. The story is being constructed in your head. Okay. So the question is, some of the stories can be very difficult, but that difficulty could either be because of wrong grammar or it could be because of genuine complexity. For example, if I don't know English and if I want to say I went to the bus stop, I could say bus went the stop I. If I say that, you won't understand it, right? It's all wrong syntax. So the point is, for the film to be understood on two levels, a difficult film could be wrong grammar. A difficult film could be genuinely complex intent and complex thought in it. A lot of people, a lot of films which I take to be difficult, people take to be difficult, are basically not grammatically they're not correct, syntactically they're not very correct. Okay, so the point is that this is the thing.
Name a few, sir. To name a few, like which is generally
Yeah,
considered to be
it
very
won't speak well of the director, or I'll not speak of it. But a number of them are there. I would say, like, for example, yeah, I would say that, yeah, it's not that easy. Time gets confused, chronology gets confused. It happens in
Okay,
English.
I get where you're hinting at. I get what you're hinting
Yeah,
at.
okay, all right. I'd rather not say it. Okay. The point is, it's also recorded. See, the thing is, Kubrick is knew his cinema very well. Kubrick was never like that.
No, not
No.
Kubrick, man.
Kubrick knew his, but there are a lot of people. I don't mean, a lot of cinema which is
Very popular
unnecessarily
director.
complex,
Very popular director.
even unnecessarily complex, unnecessarily thing. But the point is that the basic syntax is not delivered. This happens with a lot of avant-garde stuff. A lot of avant-garde stuff, especially in India, is basically bad grammar. Okay. Nolan, not so, no Ross, they're all okay. These are all the I wouldn't.
Roslini, new
Okay,
Basu sir.
who's Basu sir?
Who's Basu sir? Who's Basu sir?
I don't know. Let me not. But the point is, you can.
Yeah, we're digressing.
For example, I'll tell you who are the kind of directors. Don Siegel is a perfect filmmaker in terms of delivering the story, right?
True.
Now, the American filmmakers, there are a lot of American filmmakers, the classical American filmmakers, they know exactly how to tell a story absolutely perfectly. Gaspar Noé would be, I'm not likely to run into him. Gaspar Noé would be a particularly bad grammatically incorrect filmmaker, I would say. Gaspar Noé. Okay. He does a lot of stuff to shock, but I think Gaspar Noé is a good example. Okay.
I'm assuming that you don't like Lars von Trier as well that much.
No, but he's grammatically correct. I don't like him.
Grammatically, he's correct, but
I don't like him. But what are the other reasons? Okay, anyway, I've written a book on 50 filmmakers. You can have a look at it if you're interested. Okay, so then you film gives us So the question is this business of constructing a story in your head from the images is called narrativity. Okay, this is the basic thing. So now then you come to the second thing. The second kind of meaning is the conceptual, what is called the conceptual meaning. It usually corresponds to the moral of the story. Moral of the story. Okay. Now the thing is, the moral of any story, like Wizard of Oz, the moral in Wizard of Oz is there'll be one line usually in the film. There's no place like home or something. Like home. That thing is there. So that's the basic that one line of dialogue will be there. Now 1 and 2 together, that is the referential meaning and the conceptual meaning together are called the literal meaning of any film. They're the literal meaning of the film. And everybody absorbs this. I mean, any cinephile who goes to any film should be able to absorb this. And I would say that the Americans have perfected this art of delivering the story without interference, without, all the top directors in American cinema knew exactly how to deliver the story. There was no problem. Yeah, this is a very interesting question. How to differentiate surrealist cinema from bad grammar? Well, let's say that Buñuel, when he started making commercial movies, was absolutely intelligible. Okay. See, the point is what usually happens is that before you write Ulysses like James Joyce, you got to write conventional pieces, right? Before you make experimental works, you show who you are. Okay, your own competence you demonstrate through straightforward narration, and then you go into experimentation. So you demonstrated. There's a context created of who you are. I'm Aryan Singh, filmmaker. I already demonstrated that I can tell a story straightforward way. Now I'm going to experiment. You say that. This is an interesting question, how you figure out, say, Anshi and Andalu. How do you know it's an experiment? Well, I think you can. Anshi and Andalu simply because of the effects the movie gets, the kind of effects it gets. It's hardly lukewarm. It's shocking in a way. It has got a certain, kind of humor. It's got certain effects. You can't follow the story, but there are effects to be got. Okay. I would say that when, for example, Eraserhead, for instance. Lynch's Eraserhead. It's not very clear what he's doing in that film, but there is no doubt that it's a masterpiece. I don't know.
Exactly, because the grammar is in place.
The question is, I can't really tell you how that happens, but if you look at the film and you see how he gets this effect, how he gets that effect, it's the thing of somebody who knows his cinema very well. A film like Eraserhead, the kind of effects he gets out of that can't be done by somebody who doesn't know his cinema. It's difficult to explain how this happens. Yeah, can it be considered?
No,
I think you'll know about it. I don't think that it's not out of the box thinking. I think a lot of people say you've got preconceived notions. So you have an audience of some sort, right? Now your Anshi and Andalu, Buñuel's Anshi and Andalu was catering to highly educated, kind of radical audience. He was not showing it to the general multitude. He was not releasing it in a multiplex. The point is you always pick a certain audience. It was released to maybe shown to some 100 people or 50 people or something in a very radical phase of France. It is not showing. You can't take Anshi and Andalu and show it in a multiplex today and think you'll get in. You'll also look at the audience he picks. Okay. So the question is, now what happens with the blockbusters and all that? What happens is with large audiences, film festival audiences, you don't pick your audience. You show it to whoever comes there, right? The important thing is you pick your audience. So Anshi and Andalu that way picked a certain audience. It was not released in public theaters. It was released for a very radically minded surrealist, whatever, anarchist public, right? Yeah, it is Tarkovsky. There is no doubt about Tarkovsky's what do you say? His knowledge of syntax. There can be no doubt. He makes complex films. There is no doubt. But I don't want to name people. But Gaspar Noé is one person, right? Who I would really shall we say, have doubts about his grasp of grammar, of syntax. Okay, let's go on to this. What is the next? The third kind of meaning is called the covert meaning or the symbolic meaning. Now, this usually what happens here is you really don't know what the film is, and this is where interpretation comes in very much. I think a film like Vertigo would tell you what is Vertigo trying to do. Vertigo is pretty clear in terms of story. Referential meaning is very clear. Conceptual meaning is also pretty clear of love and this, that sort of thing. But what is the third kind of meaning? It's symbolic meaning. What is he doing? What is a redwood tree? Then you start looking at the individual elements there. Who is Scotty in love with? Is Scotty in love with Madeline, or is he in love with Judy? He's not in love with Judy. He has never seen Madeline. So who is he really in love with? And then you start looking at the thing of, the nature of love itself. What does one love one's own projections, or one does love another person, that sort of thing. Lars von Trier is fairly simple. He's not a very difficult filmmaker, actually. He's an excellent craftsman. There's no doubt about Lars von Trier. He's not a difficult filmmaker. I wouldn't call him a difficult filmmaker at all. He's a melodramatic. He produces melodrama of some sort. Okay, especially his early movies like Dancer in the Dark. It's melodrama of some sort, right? The point is, he's not a difficult filmmaker. The difficult filmmakers here are people like Lynch. Lynch would be very difficult here. Okay, Lynch is the kind of filmmaker. I mean, to interpret Lynch, what exactly he's doing, you have one view, somebody else has another view, a third person has the third view. There's no reason to think of Slavoj Zizek as any kind of authority on Lynch, though he's looking at Lacanian psychoanalysis and doing that. So this is probably, in my opinion, the most rewarding aspect of film criticism or film Lynch. Yeah, David Lynch. Yeah, okay. This is the most rewarding aspect of film criticism. You look at Rivette, another person, film of I don't know if you've heard of Rivette, Rivette. He's one of the French New Wave, in my opinion, the most interesting of the French, probably the greatest of the French New Wave.
Jacques Rivette.
Jacques Rivette is very difficult. You should see the Celine and Julia Go Boating. La Belle Noiseuse is one called La Belle Noiseuse. I don't know if you've seen La Belle Noiseuse. 4-hour movie. You heard of it?
Yes, I've seen it.
You've seen it, yeah. You've seen that. I mean, it's a difficult film, though it's a engrossing minute by minute. You can't take your eyes off the screen. It's completely engrossing, but it's a difficult film. There are other movies. I don't know if you've seen Paris Belongs to Us. It's a very difficult film. His first movie. But the point is, his syntax is not a question of his syntax being faulty. He's a difficult filmmaker.
Do you see anyone like that in India?
No. In Indian cinema, Seven Seal is a fairly simple film. It's not a difficult film. Yeah, I'll give you a list of movies, the difficult movies. I'll write the names of the movie. I'll just say some. Robert Bresson is a very difficult filmmaker. Okay, Robert Bresson is a very difficult filmmaker. To exactly what effects he's getting, why is he doing that, what his manner is. He's very minimalist. Very little is showing, but he's a very difficult filmmaker. So the question is, I would recommend that you look at this and try to. These are three kinds of meanings. Now, the three kinds of Manikol is one of the people I have some doubts about his syntax. Okay. Now, the point is coming to this three categories. Okay. Together, all three of them correspond to comprehension. It's not interpretation as much as comprehension. Though you can use the term interpretation broadly to cover all four. The fourth one also. The fourth category is called deep interpretation. Okay. Deep interpretation is the symptomatic meaning of a film. Okay, what exactly the prejudices that the filmmaker may have, what it's also called the repressed meaning. And the repressed meaning, like your Hitchcock and his castration complex or whatever, that is the repressed meaning of a film. That is basically part of pedagogy to teach students who are already into some kind of thing like psychoanalysis or into Marxist studies. For example, this entire thing of the parent or something, the role of the family in Althusser. Have you heard of Althusser? Louis Althusser,
No.
Althusser. His notion of the ideological state apparatus, all that is frequently used in cinema. Okay, basically philosophical, but it doesn't have so much to do with I think that whatever I showed you, ideal thing would be that I've sent you a Laura Mulvey thing. That would be the typical example of deep interpretation, right? What is ISA? Yeah, correct. ISA. Ideological state apparatus and some other state apparatus. What is the other one? Repressive state apparatus are the two things. ISA, RSA. Okay. These are the things. Now, these are not in any way important to cinephilia. They're important to cinema, but not to cinephilia, which means appreciation of cinema. So these are outside that. What you call about ISA, RSA, psychoanalysis, Lacan, Freud, all these are outside that. So my understanding of appreciation is, when you say film appreciation, I mean appreciation means love of cinema. Okay. These films don't really do that. As I said, the fourth kind of interpretation is ornithology, to birds, right? It's that kind of thing. Okay. Now you have come to any questions up to here? Comprehension, interpretation. Susan Sontag wrote this essay called Against Interpretation. Okay. And she was really talking about the fourth kind of interpretation, which she said is the revenge of the intellect upon art. That is what she said. That interpretation is the revenge of the intellect upon art. Okay. That is her pronouncement upon deep interpretation. And deep, the word deep doesn't mean profound. It does not mean profound. It means simply going beneath the surface. The other three together are called comprehension or surface interpretation. It's also by Susan Sontag. Okay. This surface interpretation, the first three I told you are surface interpretation. So I would, you can write down the kind of movies. I would say Bresson, Rivette. Okay. The Japanese, I think Mizoguchi is very difficult. It can be difficult, but at the same time he works at various levels, so you can absorb him at one level, or you can get deeper and understand him at some other level. You will not. Ozu also. Ozu also in some way. The Ozu is not difficult in this sense. Ozu is more reflective, I mean, you can't interpret Ozu, I think, or you can possibly, yeah. You can probably, Ozu also the third kind of meaning. You can't really dig out the fourth kind of meaning out of these people at all, out of the Japanese filmmakers. You know, what's his name? Roland Barthes made a pronouncement that the author is dead. What he meant was, you study only text, you don't bother about who the author is. So this goes against the author theory. That is, the author as the person who authors the work, whose personality is very reflected in the film. Barthes, they dismissed that out of hand and said it's not important. But the point is that when you actually study movies from this fourth point of view, which is deep interpretation, you don't pick Citizen Kane for that. Okay, you pick the run-of-the-mill movies. Roland Barthes, Rolandbarthes, French. Okay. Okay, he said the author is dead. A famous pronouncement of this critic. Now the point is that he said, study the text, don't bother about the author of the text. But the point is, when you actual death of the author, yeah. Correct, right. So when you actually go to select movies to do this deep interpretation, which is to do this textual analysis, usually go to the run-of-the-mill movie. You will not go to Citizen Kane. You will not go to Bergman. You will not go to Kubrick. You will not do that, okay? You will go to movies which are kept away from this. In fact, I've just completed a book on all this satire and all that. Kubrick, nobody interprets like that. Fassbinder, probably, Fassbinder, Buñuel, they allowed themselves to be psychoanalytically, they invited psychoanalytical readings, which is actually not deep interpretation, but that there was psychoanalysis was part of the meaning of the film itself. Okay. Okay. Now this completes here up to here. Now we'll talk about Indian cinema, right? By and large, Indian cinema is transparent in its effects. The conceptual meaning is straightforward. The moral of the film always comes through. Okay. It's like a fable. I already said that in the first day. And secondly, understanding the story is a vehicle for the meaning, for the conceptual meaning. So you can't interpret in the Indian movies in the third sense. Here I will recommend one Hindi movie which I think is very complex. With a lot, for example, in Indian movies there is no irony. Have you come across irony?
Irony of what sort?
You know, irony is nuance, meaning, meaning something else. I don't mean double meaning is dirty meaning. I don't mean that. I mean,
Hmm.
the story having some other thing. And when you're saying yes, you're actually not saying yes. So obviously, this kind of thing. Melodramatic public. That's a book. Melodramatic public. No, you look at this. Yes, Ravi Vasudevan's book. I will say you look at this movie. I would suggest you've heard of J.P. Datta.
Yes, sir.
I'm very fond of J.P. Datta. There's a movie of his called Hatyar from the 80s. Have a look at a good print of that movie. I think it's an extremely subtle movie. It seems to be missed. It's in my opinion, it's too subtle for the audience. It's got all kinds of the way it's placed. You just look at that movie. It does this angry young man thing, but it plays it in a completely different way. You have a look at the J.P. Datta's Hatyar. I would say that one of the really subtle Indian movies that I've come across, Bollywood movies. Okay, other things by and large, sarcasm is there, especially in political cinema. Mrinal Sen, there is sarcasm. There's a kind of mockery is there, but you don't find irony. All of you are aware of the word irony, what it means, IRONY. If you are aware of catching what irony means, it's a certain nuance. Okay, when you're saying something in a straightforward
It
way.
is there in some of the mainstream satires, like the ones that Subhash Kapoor makes these days. Like, say, there was a film called Phas Gaye Re Obama, which was about recession.
No,
It
it's
was
I
very
tell you
subtle.
what, you see, they use mockery that you can call ironic. I would say there's a lot of irony in. It's a standard thing in Western writing. Okay, Western writing, Western cinema. There's a lot of irony in any great writer. Dostoevsky would be any great writer would be heavily ironic in his thing. But you will not find this irony as an emotion. What can I tell you? I think Lynch is terribly ironic. Avatar Cows 27 Down is a good one, good example. I think there's irony there. Okay, that is a very good movie which people have forgotten altogether. Avatar Cows 27 Down. It's a very good movie, but also there's also a bit of sarcasm and a certain bitterness in that movie. But the point is that there is irony in that film. There is something that is what seems to be positive is not quite positive. It could mean this way or that way. Okay. That is nuance. Shatrinsky, Ray, of course, is always ironic. Ray is extremely ironic. All his films have irony, including Pather Panchali. I think sarcasm Ray doesn't use, whereas irony is full of irony. Whereas Mrinal Sen doesn't use irony, he uses sarcasm. Okay, which is fairly common in Indian cinema. And what you said, you said something Kapoor or something, some film.
Subhash Kapoor, who made Phas Gaye Re Obama, which was about
I've not
recession.
seen this thing. You check out this thing. What's it called? Hatyar. I would recommend that. Okay. Arika Aribam Sham Sharma's Imagine Inktem, I would strongly recommend, one of the great Indian movies. Unfortunately, it's extremely bad print and the camera thing is very shoddy. So it's difficult. Otherwise, I would recommend that film. Okay. Now, the point is complexity and ambiguity are virtues which all art is supposed to think. Indian cinemas are not complex. They're not ambiguous. Okay. So what happens is,
So, what about Om Darvadar, a film like Om Darvadar? How would you categorize that?
I don't think Gatas Radha is irony. It has a certain. I may have a little. I'm not so sure about that. Yeah, we'll have to say. I'll have to think about it. I haven't thought about Gatas Radha. But by and large, irony is not there. Irony. See what happens is the difference between sarcasm and irony is sarcasm is already saying one thing only, but it's couching it in different terms. Okay, you get me? Irony is actually finely balanced between two sides. Okay, they're not the same. See, sarcasm, you're already saying the opposite of what you're pretending to say. Irony is not doing that. Okay, irony is actually balanced. It's looking at two sides. So what you call irony is usually sarcasm. It may not be too broad. It may not be too obviously sarcastic. But the point is, irony is not. It is not saying the opposite of what it's trying to say. Sarcasm is. Okay, that is the basic difference. Now, academics who write about Indian cinema resort to deep interpretation when they're interpreting it, because that seems to sort of excavate more meanings. Now, I'll conclude this thing with my own preference. Elipatayam has irony. Elipatayam also has sarcasm, but it has irony. I think Adur Gopalakrishnan had irony. I think Mukhamukam is very ironic. Mukhamukam was ironic. I think this man was very ironic. What is this? Arvindan, G. Arvindan was irony. I think Aribam Sham Sharma has
Kamal
irony.
Swarup?
Kamal
Kamal
Swarup,
Swarup?
the first 20 minutes I understood of that movie. After that, I forgot. I lost touch with that movie. Anyway, they get snow. This one, what is it called? I think Estapan. You look at Estapan. Estapan, I would say. Kumatti, Estapan, I would say. Okay. This, I don't know what you mean by this. First and last shots, okay, whatever. But the point is this, okay, my own interpretation of Hindi cinema, the way I would choose to interpret it is to understand what it means, okay, is to first of all look at anomalies in a representation, right? I mean, is this the normal way in which something is represented? If it is not represented in that way, what is it? Now, let's take, for example, the movie like Bobby, right? Now, the question is, it's about poor boy, poor girl, rich boy, right? But the point is, what is that thing of that man taking out currency notes and saying, "Tumhara paas paisa hai, mera paas bhi paisa hai," and he takes and put currency notes. If he is the poor girl and he's a rich boy, why is the poor girl's father bringing out currency notes and piling it on the table? What do you make of that? It's an anomaly. What I mean by anomaly, and my own understanding is, you got to look at what's happening in the public space at that time. And my understanding of that is that this was the time when Indira Gandhi was going out against the big bourgeoisie and supporting the small bourgeoisie, that is the small business and all that. So what these fellows are saying is that monopoly houses are out. Okay, played by Pran is a monopoly house. You big fellow, we are out. We will, not Garibi Hatao alone. It was also what you call the small industries and all that. Small industries will also be encouraged. Small industries, we're courting the small industrialists. So basically, the fact that that Jack Braganza is a person who's into small business, but he's made a lot of money, and he's saying your class may be thing, but it's not that I don't have money. Don't talk to me about money. Is that kind of that kind of tussle in the public space between small industry. I don't know if you're aware of IDBI, C2B were two different things. Small scale industries, all that. Okay. So that was it. That is my understanding of that meaning of that. So you got to look at a little deeper. Look at anomalies. Why is this presenting something in a certain way? Why not in another way? Okay. Now take something like Amar Akbar Antony. Okay. You got to be a little Amar Akbar Antony. What are this Amar Akbar Antony about?
So secularism, the deaths and the turmoil of secularism.
It's about a Hindu, a Christian,
Hindu,
and a Muslim.
Christian, and a Muslim. Yeah.
No, it's about a Christian, a Muslim, and a police officer.
How?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, he is
Vinod
a police
Khanna
officer.
is a police officer. See, the point is, it's a police officer. See, Hindu has no meaning in Hindi cinema. Everybody is a Hindu. Okay, unless his religion is demarcated. You got to see this as basically a Christian, a Muslim, and a police officer. And the point is, he's trying to make is the police officer represents the state. So these two are criminals or whatever, or marginalized people, right? He's talking about the thing of the marginalized becoming with the one with the state. The state embracing the marginalized, which was Indira Gandhi's rhetoric. Okay. I don't know what othering. I don't know what this is, but basically that is it. So the question is also, if I don't know if you know this man, what's his name? Who made Amar Akbar Antony?
Manmohan Desai.
Manmohan Desai. He was a Congress. He was a Congress supporter, right? In some way, he made these movies.
Yeah, that's why there was this image, that the kids separated under the statue of Mahatma Gandhi.
What he's saying is that Gandhiism will not bring people together. And who was Gandhi is there? Jaiprakash Narayan. He's saying, okay, Jaiprakash Narayan is the Gandhian. It is not Gandhi. Okay. So he's saying Gandhiism will not bring the people together. The state have to be unified with that's what he's talking about. So it's basically a Congress. The message is I mean, this is subtleties that people can bring into the thing, but people don't read this. I mean, I don't know whether critics don't read. I think I try to do some such thing with Amar Akbar Antony, but that's what it's about. A Christian, a Muslim. It's not secularism. A Christian, a Muslim, and a police officer. Okay.
Is Abbas Kiarostami, do you call him is he into metaphor or is he into irony, or sarcasm?
Yeah, he's irony, but Kiarostami, my favorite Kiarostami movie is Under the Olive Trees. Okay. It's a very interesting movie because the actors and the characters are the same, right?
Yeah.
Okay. No, exactly. What is the thing? What is Kiarostami? It's very full of irony because Kiarostami, what is his position, right? He's
Yep.
talking to that Hussein, I think his name is, right? He's talking to Hussein all the time, and Hussein is saying all kinds of things. Okay, we don't know exactly where Kiarostami is standing in relation to that. That's what I mean by irony. Okay, he's standing. He's taking a very Hussein is making some outrageous statements, right? Very sincerely in the film. Okay, so my point is that he's extremely ironic. I think Kiarostami is extremely ironic. It's the same with okay. So yesterday you asked me last week also, no? Film analysis. Look, film analysis is a broad term, right? It's a very broad term. I don't know what you mean by film analysis. I've told you about film interpretation. You can analyze. Look, even what do you say? Reviewer should analyze. Analysis is common to everything. Okay. Analysis is common to all three forms. So analysis means what? Look at the parts of the movie and try to bring them together, how they related to the whole. This is analysis, right? The point is everybody would do this. Academic film criticism would do it. A good reviewer would do it, would analyze. You would analyze your friends' conduct when you gossip. Don't you analyze your friends' conduct? Everybody analyzes. Why is this man doing this? Why is he saying he's going to give his life for me? At the same time, he leaves me holding the bill. Okay, in the restaurant. Isn't an analysis? You do that. Okay. The point is analysis is a fundamental thing of any kind of intellectual activity, and I'm not saying the intellectual activity is only the essay. Even reviewing should be an intellectual activity, and certainly academic is an intellectual activity. But the question is what ends they are serving, right? So this word analysis is too broad a term. It can be used for everything. Any kind of thing where you're looking at the parts of it and relating it to the totality of the thing. It's in an intended effect as well as unintended effect. This is called analysis.
How can you differentiate between the cinematic movement films? Is it time based or style? Okay.
Yeah, I
What is
certainly Court. I think that man is going to go far. Whatever I've seen of Court is probably one of the best movies I've seen in the past 10 years. It's full of irony, definitely ironic. There's no doubt at all. It's not common in popular cinema. It's not common. It's even in art cinema. It's not very very common. But there are these exceptions where this irony is. This movie Tithi, Kannada movie, is also quite ironic.
Yeah.
So irony is a nuance, whereas sarcasm is already saying the opposite what it's pretending to say. Okay. Any other questions?
So one question.
Please.
While watching Three Idiots, probably in my like seventh or eighth, I thought like it's making me laugh and cry at the same time. I
Okay.
thought it's the greatest emotion that's ever created. And while while time passes, as you now are saying, the deeper interpretation should not be done because it cannot be done. I mean, the more you do it, the more melodramatic it is. So as time passes, you change as people, and you do not like to have a deeper interpretation, and you just like to look at people and maybe understand the real aspects of it or whatever. But still, the whole country is into that kind of an emotion, right? Like if you categorize, there are a lot of people who would really want to laugh and cry at the same time. I mean, where do you place Raju Irani in all of this?
Look, you take Three Idiots. Okay. I want to ask you a question. What is this what's his name, Rancho character? Okay, now he's supposed to be a gardener's son? Okay, is he supposed to be a gardener's son? If he's a gardener's son, is he going to go to somebody's house and laugh at the kind of food they're eating? He behaves all the time like somebody who is who comes from an upper class thing. How would he have those characteristics if he's a gardener's son? I don't know. The point is, the point is that these people don't even follow the logic of their own stories. They don't follow their own logic. How do you come up with this? I don't know. Have you seen Vertigo? There's a certain scene where in Vertigo, I'm not saying it's comparable to Three Idiots, but I'm saying there's a certain scene where this woman says, it's too late, it's too late, it's too late. You remember that?
Yeah.
So you think it's some kind of a metaphysical thing of destiny or some such thing. When they replay the scene later on, you know that the car is coming in a distance. So that has got a different meaning altogether. That is, it's too late because that woman has already been murdered and her body has been brought up. That's what it means. So the question is, if this Punsuk Wangdu or this Rancho is really a gardener's son, shouldn't he in the early parts of the movie indicate that he's a guy, that indicates some characteristics of the gardener's son? How are we to take that? Okay, I really don't know what to make of these movies. I don't know how to evaluate these movies. And somebody asked a question about why Indian films are simple. I think they're simple because they don't follow mimesis. They don't pay attention to the world. They pay attention to messages. And the message is always simpler than the world, right? If you actually look at the world and observation, you will find all kinds of complexities. Find all kinds of complexities in the world. Okay, things against each other, this sort of thing. But there are genuine complexities in the world. If you don't pay attention to the world, you don't observe, you don't note, you simply want to pass on a message of a moral message or whatever, then automatically your film will become simpler. That is the main reason, I think. I think Indian cinema is fixated on messages. It's fixated on morals. It's fixated. I mean, when I say morals, I don't mean ethics. I mean passing on morals, passing on this. For example, the moral could be togetherness of family in Hum Aapke Kaun, or it could be what's it called, self-actualization in Bunty or Bubbly. Okay, but it's basically that moral is the thing. When you start doing that, you don't look at the actual conditions, then the film becomes simple. You can't interpret it at all. What is there? There's nothing. You're just telling us a message. Can you take an Aesop's fables and interpret it in any way? No, you can't do it. So this is the basic among the fundamental things. It's only when you start being observant about the world, how exactly the world is working. You take something like some realistic movies, right? Something like Masan. You take something like Masan. Now, the first question I would want to know is like a man likely to, when consensual sex is involved, is a man likely to, on what grounds are the police raiding this place, arresting them, and why is that man committing suicide? They're adults. They're grown adults. Why should that happen? And in a place like Benares, is it possible that a professor of Sanskrit or whatever, these are just questions, right, is going to be terrorized by a low-ranking policeman? All of you will know some policeman, right? Fairly high-ranking policeman. If somebody were to attack you, some criminals were to attack you and you needed police help, you will go to a superintendent of police. You will have minimum. All of you middle-class people, educated people, you would have. It's only the poor who don't have access to the, a middle-class person, especially a person who's educated, all that. The police are acting like, they're all for us. So I'm saying these are all things you must pay attention to. If you take something like Titli, for instance, do you know that they break her hand in order to prevent her from signing some fixed deposit? Okay. If you know very well that if you break your hand, they can put your thumb impression. Okay. Now, these are things you should know. Now, the point is, we should pay attention to the world, is what I'm saying. We should pay attention to the world. Look at this thing, whatever you may do, whatever aspects of the world you look at, you must be pretty accurate about the world.
Suhas here. I wanted to ask about filmmakers like Sai Paranspe and Shyam Benegal. Is there any remarkable work or any kind of appreciable work there?
I'll tell you I'll tell you the Malayalis are the guys who, some 2 or 3 of them are there who I've highly appreciated. People like Adur has done some early work, was very good. Arvindan was good. John Abraham made one good movie. The Manipuri Aribam Sham Sharma has made 2 very good movies. Ray and Ghatak have made good movies. Then occasionally you have something like the Marathi, The Court is a good movie. Titi is a good movie. But by and large, this thing of I think JP Datta made some 3-4 good movies within the commercial thing in the 80s, not before Border. But again, you'll have to. It requires a lot of work on the part of the critic to look at this thing. It's difficult to say. Okay, but Benegal, I would say Benegal. What would I think of Benegal? Benegal, I think Ankur was a decent film. I think they were good films. Ankur was good. I think Manthan were good, but they were not complex films. Keda Ketara is obviously an excellent film. There's no doubt at all. They were not complex. See, we're talking here not about good films. There are plenty of good movies, right? Govind Nihlani was he made Akrosh. They're all good movies. But I'm talking in terms of complexity. That is, when you have to interpret this against that you read this in context of that. Ray did some of that. These Adur and some they did some such thing. Ghatak did some such thing. But by and large, the number of Hindi, like for example, you take, I would say that Hum Aapke Hain Kaun is a good movie. It's not a complex movie, but it's a good movie. Okay.
Mhm.
I would say a lot of, but the question is not simply a matter of good or bad. It's a question of complexity and ambiguity. Does this thing mean one thing? Can you interpret it in some way? What is the role for the interpretive critic? Is my basic thing. It's not simply a matter of good or bad. See, for example, there are a lot of Hollywood movies which are not great movies, which are very good movies, but they're not complex. For example, Don Siegel is some filmmaker. He's not a complex filmmaker. But if you've seen Dirty Harry is something. Can you interpret Dirty Harry? No, you can't interpret it. I suggest you see that another one about the aerial thing, couple of other movies. These fellows are excellent filmmakers. But the question is, can you interpret their movies? You can't. You can interpret Hawks, you can interpret Nicholas Ray, you can interpret Altman, you can interpret all of them, but you can't interpret somebody like Don Siegel, who seems simple. So the question is simple. When you take the really great cinema, complexity and ambiguity are the virtues that you look at in great cinema. Okay. And it's not that there are so many filmmakers. There are any number of good filmmakers in India, especially the older thing. For example, I would say I would be very fond of Guru Dutt was good. Guru Dutt not complex. Andrei Rublev is Tarkovsky is complex. But I'm saying Guru Dutt and Raj Khosla, I think is an excellent filmmaker. He knew his syntax, nobody speaks about him today. Raj Khosla knew his film syntax very well. Okay. I think CID, if you look at CID and some other movies of Raj Khosla, I would rate him even higher than Guru Dutt in terms of his filmmaking, storytelling. I think Kala Pani, some 4 or 5 movies, is excellent. But they were, I think they were good filmmakers. I think Pakiza, is an exceedingly good movie. Okay. I'd put it in my top favorite Indian movies, but whether it's complex is a different matter. Right? That's the thing. So complexity and ambiguity is a different issue. You got to look at that, and when you look at movies, this is what you should so that you find readily in great filmmaking. Okay? Complexity and ambiguity. You will not find it in the simpler kinds of cinema. Okay.
In Titi, I would say it has that irony element.
There,
that
yeah.
you're talking about, but there's nothing to be complex and
No, it's not.
ambiguous in Titi.
No, it's not. It's not. I agree with you there. I agree with that.
So irony is
Okay, please.
greater sort of sense that
Irony is a nuance, I would say. You're looking for nuance in cinema, right? Irony is a kind of nuance, which is that what you're saying is not exactly what you're saying. There is actually a nuance. There's something else being said. That is irony. Okay.
What else is something that's complex and ambiguous at the same time other than irony?
Complex is 2 different meanings, 2 different complexities. Characters, for example, if you read Dostoevsky,
Yeah.
okay. If you read Dostoevsky, I would recommend this movie also. Okay, shall I give you some movies? See this movie on YouTube called The Son of the Sleepless. I recommended it last. You just have a look at the way the characters are put together. Okay, it doesn't have what you say a symbolic meaning, but just look at the way the characters are stationed in relation to each other, their reactions in relation to each other, and see whether they come together or not. See complexity and ambiguity in the sense that it all doesn't coalesce into a single meaning. Okay, you understand me?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so Last Year and Marian Bard would require interpretation. So that non-coalescing into a single meaning, that is, this is working at some level, that is working at some other level, that is complexity and ambiguity. And because the world is complex and ambiguous, okay, it can't be understood. Complexity and ambiguity are important in cinema, is what I'm saying. Okay.
That's wonderfully put, and it's absolutely true.
Yeah,
And
that's all I'm saying. Okay.
Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much, sir.
Welcome,
thank you.
welcome. Please, please.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.